So that example we just gave is an example of the principle of faith and how it can affect your life in a practical manner, isn't it? And this is the same with every principle. And the beauty of it is if you apply the principle, you can apply it to every situation. So if you come to feel the principle in your heart, what happens quite naturally is you start applying that principle to every situation you're in. And so an example of that is, let's say you have faith that meeting people's addictions is not a good thing. So let's say you develop faith in that. So in other words, you have faith that you must not meet a person's addictions and it will bring the best outcome. So that's what you have faith in. Let's say.
Or can we say it in a more direct way? The best thing I can do is not meet people's addictions.
Yeah. And you have faith that that's true. Right? So when you have faith in that, every time somebody tries to engage you in addiction, you just won't do it. Right? And you'll see the benefits of not doing it in every case. Like where it would have led you and then where you didn't go because you didn't do it. You know, where that other thing could have led you and you didn't do it, and so it didn't lead you down that garden path either. And you start seeing all the benefits of it and you start measuring it. But if it's in your heart, you can do that. If it's not in your head or just as a concept, you're not going to do it. People are going to engage in addiction with you, and you'll be right. You'll be right in it, and then afterwards you go, oh, there I was in that addiction again. But because you don't have faith that not responding to a person's addiction is a good thing, you'll keep responding. You'll keep responding to their addictions, thinking that you're doing good when actually it's just harming you and them. And the consequences will be shown to you quite clearly through that. So there's another example how faith in a truth, which is not to meet people's addictions. So that's the truth. That's the loving thing, and it's also the truth. If you have faith in it, it can benefit your life greatly. But on earth, again, the average person has faith in the opposite of that. And that's why we have such a mess on earth. In fact, there's a lot of things on earth that wouldn't get done at all without addiction at the moment. Most people wouldn't clean unless there was addiction involved. So in other words, you take away all the cleaners that are paid, how many people would clean? Would there be rubbish collectors? If you took away all the paid rubbish collectors, who would collect rubbish? How many people really want to collect rubbish? Because you could have a passion for collecting rubbish, because you could have a passion for dealing with it, but the average person who does it at the moment is doing it for a wage. So they're in an addiction doing it. And so you took away the wage. What do you take away? You walk down a city street in one of the big cities like New York or San Diego, Los Angeles, where we were, and there was no rubbish collection. It would be, there's like 12 million people in a small space with no rubbish collection. It'd be a major disaster within a few days, right? And it would just be worse and worse and worse with every day, right? And this is the thing, is that there are a lot of things on earth that are only functioning right now because of addictions in the wrong direction. Faith in the wrong direction. Yeah. And you start seeing that as well. Yes, all right. Yeah.
I just want to follow on from the principle of faith.
Yeah.
And your example of not meeting people's addictions.
Well, I suppose what we're doing was illustrating where we with faith, if you understood the principle, how it would impact your daily life in terms of what you choose to do.
And my question is, if you had that principle in your heart,
Yep.
say with example, like we often try not to meet people's addictions, but you don't have faith in that, say, truth.
Yeah.
And so
Then you'll still continue to meet their addictions.
But if you had the faith, would it be a feeling because you'd automatically recognise that it was addiction because there's this feeling that happens?
Correct. So
rather
this is
than try so
before you
hard.
even understood the sort of even the badness of addiction. If you had faith in the truth that
Meeting addictions is bad,
is bad,
always leads to bad.
always leads to badness, then you could see it would help you a lot to recognise the potential addictions that could lead you astray,
Yeah.
one way or the other.
And you wouldn't have to know all of them or understand a whole lot of stuff because the principles, I don't really understand how, but it's...
Well, you become, when the principle is in your heart, you become sensitive to every time it's broken. So this is a very interesting part about principles. It's like, if the truth principle is in your heart, then every time you've acted or somebody else has acted out of harmony with truth, you feel it straight away.
Yeah.
When it's in your head, you don't know. You're like, you just try to guess, really, what's happening here, what's happening there. But when it's in your heart, you can feel that, no, something's gone wrong here. And when the principle is there. So most people don't understand the economy of principles being in your heart. If the principle is in your heart, it's a very economical way to live your life, because you'll automatically be able to be sensitive to when something's off or wrong or not worth pursuing or worth doing, even though it looks like it's not necessarily worth doing. And there's all sorts of things that you can now see because your principle is in your heart that you couldn't see before. And a part of your soul's sense of sight is developed by principle. So in other words, that you will not see the things that you are unprincipled about. So you physically can't even see them with your eyes. You can't even see them when your soul is unprincipled. Now, an illustration of that is the majority of you can't see when two people are in an addiction with each other. And that's because your soul, your physical eyesight is responding to the lack of principle in your soul about that matter. So let's say you've got a man and a woman and they're actually in addiction with each other. For many of you, you can't even see that. Like, you can't even see they're in addiction with each other because your own eyesight can be looking at them and observing them but not seeing it.
Because you're not feeling.
Because you're not sensitive to the principle that when people meet addictions, it's bad for them, right? And so you won't even, you'll be watching an event and it will be happening right in front of you, and it's like it's not even happening to you. You're like, you don't even see it happening. You don't even think it's happening, right? And this is an example of how even your own physical eyesight, what you listen to, is the same. Many people hear conversation and they don't really hear the conversation, and because most of us hear it through our lack of principles, right? So the lack of principles affects your hearing, your eyesight, your sense of touch, taste, touch, all sorts of things. Your lack of principles affect, and most people don't realise how practical it is to have principles because they don't see the relationship between the principle in the soul and how it affects the sensory application in the two bodies, physical and the spirit body. The whole physical and spirit body's senses even come alive when you're applying principle.
Or when the principle's within you, hey?
Yeah, when it has to be in your heart for it to work, but that's how it works. So an example of that is you could be with your soulmate but not in a soulmate relationship until you apply principle.
So you'd be with your soulmate but not recognise that you're soulmate
Until you
you
apply principle.
understand the principle.
Yeah. Remember I said to you guys a few weeks ago that some of you have met your soulmate,
Yeah.
at least one of you have met your soulmate, but you didn't even know, right?
Yeah.
Now, and that's because of the lack of principle. See, if the principle is in your heart, right,
Yes.
then you automatically recognise things. You automatically see things you otherwise would not see.
But Elle, you know this. It's just that you don't understand what you know.
Mm.
You're sort of like mystified, but I know you, and I know you know why you don't recognise your soulmate when they're in front of you, but you just don't understand that conceptually as about principles.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm
And that-
noticing.
yes.
It's like when I'm listening to him going, yes, and that's what I'm trying to understand the concept in relation to my feelings. Am I?
Yeah, an example of this. At your soul level, most people are sensitive enough like when I say sensitive love, the soul is literally linked to the other half of the soul,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the two halves of the soul are joined together. But the average person, when they meet their soulmate, doesn't recognise them at all. Right? Now that can only happen because of a lack of principle inside the soul. And the lack of principle being, my addictions are more important than love is. Right? So the principle of addiction, for example, is stopping me from seeing my soulmate when I meet them. Right? So I meet my soulmate, I can't even see them. I see them as a person, like, there's Mary, she's pretty, and she has hair, and she's got wings, whatever. I see them, but I don't see them in the sense I don't see, that's the other half of me. I don't see that.
Most of us are so out of harmony with the love principle when it comes to love of self and truth about our true nature. We can't even recognise it in another because we're opposing it in ourselves.
Yeah, our addictions
We
are
hate it in
opposing the
ourselves.
principles.
Yeah.
So while I'm in the addiction, I'm not going to be able to, I can meet myself, but I'll never know who it is.
Yeah.
Really, in my heart, I won't know. I might get told even though I still won't know. There's many people in the spirit world who are told who their soulmates are, and they don't believe the people who told them.
Or they're just uninterested.
Yeah. And there's, do you have to understand I know they try and understand these concepts, but I really have to understand in my head these concepts if you just get it.
Well, your head understanding will result when your heart understanding occurs.
Fully.
Yeah, your head understanding won't happen before then.
Alright, so I'm still in the process of
So-
This is just, sorry if I can just give you personal feedback, this is your worry about intellectual concepts that gets in the way of you in these discussions. Because you start to, I know you and I know you, there's some things you don't fully grasp emotionally yet, but you do grasp a lot of things emotionally, but when we start talking in language about principles now, and you're like, I'm in a panic, what is principle? And then you can't apply what you already know to the new idea, because it's a worry about intellectual concepts.
So yeah, now I'm with the principle in regards to how I view intellectual.
Well, you're in fear around intellect, which is not seeking, it's not open, it's not receptive, it's fear.
And that's when I feel
And that's when you can't understand.
Yeah. But also that indicates that you're being brought up in an environment that believes intellect is all powerful and emotions are of lesser importance. So you haven't yet emotionally accepted that actually emotions are more important. Even though you're good at them, you haven't accepted that yet.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
And I'm going to start,
So a person can be good at something without even knowing,
That's what
really that they're good at it, and at the same time be working against it in their mind.
And that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But it's very important to understand that you physically cannot even see a situation unless the principle is there. So a lot of times Mary and I, we'll be looking at the same situation. Mary sees it quite differently than I do. Right? Looking at the same situation. And then when I sort of explain the situation to you, you go, oh, that was what was happening. I was confused about what was happening, but that's what's happening. And now, you can sort of grasp it, can't you? But if you're confused, it's because the principle isn't solid yet. You follow?
Or because it's not solid, there's a desire to be insensitive to aspects of the principle often.
Yes. Yeah, an active desire to be. Your faith is saying, don't believe that thing. Right? And so if you don't believe it, you're not going to see it either. You understand?
Or if it's bugging you.
So let's say your partner is a person who's quite who has quite extreme microphones needed. Let's say your partner is a person who has quite extreme views about the fact that they're a man and so they should be the head of the house and so forth. Now, they might be kind and considerate to you and you might feel they're very loving to you all the time, but you won't see, while you have that addiction, you will not see every single time they're condescending to you, you will not see it. You will just think, oh, no, they're loving to me. When he said he's going to look after me, he was loving to me, not, oh, hang on a sec, I don't need looking after. Like, there's something wrong with that, right?
Yep.
You'll see every time, when the principle is in your heart, you'll see every time he's acting out of harmony with it.
Yeah, not just selectively.
Not selectively, yeah. And you won't, and you'll definitely not prefer him acting out of harmony with the principle.
Yeah.
You'll feel you'd want him to act in harmony with the principle, and whenever he doesn't, you go, I've got to say something about that, I've got to do something about that. But you won't even see it if the principle is not there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there are many people we met on this trip, particularly in America. We met many people on this trip, many women on the trip, who fundamentally are ruled by their husbands while they believe themselves to be free women, liberated women. And yet they were completely dominated by their husbands. Yeah, and these are women who have listened to Divine Truth for 15 years. Completely dominated by a husband. Can't see that they are even. Can't even see it. Quite obvious when you look at it, when you look at the situation, when the principle was there, wow, this is really bad, what's going on here, here's what you feel, and yet they can't see it at all.
Yeah. And so when we first start listening to Divine Truth, because we are principle-less from God's perspective.
Well, it's rare to find a person without any principles.
Okay, so we have misunderstandings, or we just are not necessarily in harmony with God's principles in the way of.
Correct, we're out of harmony with a lot of them.
And that's why we're so blind.
Yep.
That we
can't see things.
But
so the average one of you, when our dealings with the media, you can't see how bad they were.
Yeah.
Many times you come up and say, oh, that wasn't so bad, was it? And we go, how do you work that out? It was so bad on so many levels. And yet you think it's great. Like, or you think it's okay. Like, the average person can't see it because the principles are not there.
Yeah.
You see, when the principles are there, you'll see it. This is why a lot of people don't want the principles there, because they don't want to see things.
That's what I was getting at. Like, sometimes you and I are bugged by things, but we are resisting really seeing the principle, because then there would be the feelings that we have to feel and the actions we know we would want to take.
Yeah. That would create potential further issues that you don't want to have.
More feelings, basically.
More feelings, right.
And so our faith is corrupt in that area.
Yeah.
As we develop the actual faith principles in that it's better to feel everything, even if it's really hard. We're there to be much more sensitive and know. The key would be very knowledgeable about what exactly it was that was the problem.
Correct.
Not just being.
And you see it straight away. It's very economical once the principle's in your heart. You see it straight away. It's immediate. It's not, and you don't make any bad decisions anymore. Like you don't make a bad decision about that thing anymore. So an example of that is that, say, a person comes along and says, "Oh, I want to give God's way all of this money and help and whatever," but you can feel that they're a power person, and you can feel the principle being broken in them as they're doing it. You won't accept any of it. Because you know that it's just by accepting it, there's going to be lots of problems in your future if you accept it. You understand? So you won't break the principle.
Yes.
Yeah. But a person who doesn't want to see the principle, oh, isn't that wonderful? This person's helping out so much. Isn't it great? You know, let's go ahead with that. Not realising that you're creating the road to hell for yourself and whomever is with you by just making that choice to break the principle that you didn't even know you're really breaking because you didn't know what the principle was in your heart.
Yeah.
It's and so this is the thing about the principles. Once they're in your heart, once you know you're gonna that a choice would break them, you know, oh, this is not going to turn out good. You know, any principle broken, there's lots and lots of laws broken. When there's one principle broken, lots of, you know, so you could, on the average, when you break one principle, you're breaking thousands of laws, right? That, you know, there are millions of laws pertaining to the soul and how the soul works, and you break one principle, you break thousands of them at a time. Like, of course, it's not going to turn out good. You uphold the principle, you're not going to break all of those laws automatically. You don't even need to know what the laws are. You won't break them. And so you won't get the negative consequence of having broken them in the future. Suzanne?
I remember once Mary saying that whenever something happens anything, if there's an off feeling, like sweat the small stuff, really, I guess pause and really feel. And I just wondered, like, how in that situation would you try to discover or learn what the principle is? If you know something's
Well,
wrong,
firstly,
but you
I
don't
don't
understand.
necessarily agree with Mary's comment.
Mm.
Because you can feel bad about things when you're actually in an addiction.
I know, sorry, hang on, let's qualify
So
what
that
my
you need to
statement
qualify
was.
the comment.
This was many years ago, I said
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But I still agree that if there's something troubling you in an interaction, there's often the temptation in daily life to just skip over it if it's small enough. And I was saying, no, sweat that stuff, because that's showing you something that you need to deal with. Not necessarily that you're right if you're offended, but that if there's something that's bothering you, there is something for you to explore emotionally. That's what
But
my
I'm more
statement-
concerned
my
about things
statement was.
I'm more concerned about things that are not bothering you.
Yeah, well, that's the next level, isn't it? The things that you don't even want to acknowledge, because there's absolutely no connection to any sensitivity inside of you about it.
That's right.
That's where your biggest problems are going to be in your life.
Yeah, that's the problem of not having principles in your heart, is that there are a whole heap of areas that don't bother you, that should be bothering you,
Mm.
right? So while I agree with the comment Mary's made about just now about the fact that, if there are often very large issues within small minor details, very large principled issues in sometimes those small minor details, at the end of the day, it's all the ones you don't see that are going to be your worst problem. And if the principle is in your heart, you will see it. But if the principle is not in your heart, you will not see it. Right? And so it's all the problems you don't see that are going to cause you the most difficulty in your future.
And can you see, Suze, why we've been talking the last 2 weeks about if you put the principle before your sin, even the things that bother you, if you're really seeking that principle, then more things will be exposed to you, not just the ones that currently are. And this is the difference that Jesus was trying to explain last weekend about if you just focus on the things that bother you, it's going to be a very limited progression. It's going to be limited also to what you think the truth is about these interactions.
Your addictions, in other words.
Whereas if you seek the principle and you fall in love with the principle, now you're going to be humble to your own errors as well. You're going to be humble to your own misconceptions, your own untruth, and you're going to be sensitive to what's going on everywhere around you as well.
You think about it, Susan, in a relationship, the average person's only bothered with their partner when their own personal feelings are offended in some way. Now, that means that if you're accessing things through your own principles, which the average person in a relationship is doing, that means that I have a set of principles in me, which are not in harmony with God's, but they are mine. And Mary has a different set of principles in her, not in harmony with God's, but that in her. And this often will come from our histories and our background, our experiences and our own sin that we've committed. So now when we get together, we're in a partnership, in a relationship, and whenever Mary offends me, I'm thinking she's breaking my principles.
She's not loving me.
She's not loving me, she's breaking my principles, right? Whenever Mary feels offended, that's because she feels I'm breaking her principles, right? But there's no consideration in that place as to what principles are actually true or not.
And actually the origin of that comment, I think, is actually based on very early in our relationship, where I realised if I'm a bit bothered by something Jesus is doing, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm righteous. It means I have something to look at here about what is my expectation, do I have the right definition of love, all this sort of, which is really principled inquiry of myself about the small stuff, if you like. Yeah.
I can see where I still hang on to a lot of the principles that I learned from my parents too.
Yeah,
And
everybody
so,
does.
Yeah.
And that's where you waste a lot of time in your life, isn't it?
True.
Yeah.
Massive.
Yeah, and because everyone has their, fundamentally, as we talked about on our trip recently, fundamentally that big injury that we all believe ourselves to be God means that we all believe ourselves to have the right to establish our own principles. And that fundamentally means that my principles are going to be in disharmony with yours, right? And disharmony even with my partner's, Mary's. So if my principles were in harmony with God's, and if Mary was focused on making her principles in harmony with God's, can you see that automatically means we'll sort out our problems, doesn't it, with each other? Because the more mine become in harmony with God's, and the more Mary harmony with God's, the closer we will be, right? But often we don't see that happening in any relationship. What we see instead is the person, me, saying my principles are the only things that matter, and the other person...
And the other person, if they've heard divine truth, is like, my principles are God's principles. So when they don't have God's principles,
and of course there's constant problems.
So in relationships, because you know all about my relationship, I know that, and I know that it's very flawed. How, in an interaction, what would be a good thing to do when you feel like when this...
Just stop for a moment. See, if the principle is not in your heart, this is the kind of question you ask.
Right.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Because if the principle is in your heart, would you need to ask the question? See, let's say I'm interacting with Mary. The principle is in my heart about truth. And I have a certain feeling, and the principle in my heart says, I must say what that feeling is. Right? That's the principle in my heart. So I'm interacting with Mary. All of a sudden something comes up, I feel the feeling, the principle is in my heart, I've got to say the truth straight away. Like I'm not going to go and ask Sue, what should I do here in this relationship? Sue, can you help me out? Can you help me out? What's the principle in this? See, if the principle is in my heart, I'm going to interact with Mary in harmony with the principle in my heart.
And also, when you interact with Archie and Laura and
It'll be the
Fab
same.
and Nikki, it'll be the same decision each time. I'm going to be truthful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So these are the kind of questions, and if you think about historically all the questions that have ever been asked of me in forums and seminars and whatever, many of them are along this kind of line, aren't they? It's like, what do I do in this situation? What do I do in that situation? And most people don't realise by asking those questions, what do I do? We're really just saying, the principle's not in my heart. Can you tell me what to do so that I don't have to get the principle in my heart first? Does that make sense to you? It's like saying, I want to do the right thing, and many of you do want to do the right thing, you think, right? I'm not trying to be cheeky about it, but that's just how it is. So you think you want to do the right thing in your heart. So, but the right thing is to get the principle in your heart. That's the right thing. So let's say I know the principle's not in my heart because every time I come up with a situation, I don't know what to do. I go, what do I do here? This seems like pretty tricky. Oh, what do I do there? That seems pretty tricky. It's funny, in the groups we just had, you could talk for 18 hours straight about a principle, and somebody come up at the end of it and ask you a question about what they do in a personal situation. And you go, you didn't hear 18 hours of discussion, because if you applied the principle and it was in your heart, you'd know what to do. We wouldn't have to have this conversation. So even it's good to recognise, Sue, that whenever we say, what do I do? It's really proof that the principle isn't there yet. Because once the principle is there, I will know what to do. And I will know for certain that it's going to be the right thing to do. Without equivocation and without any doubt, I will know it's the right thing to do once the principle is in my heart.
And you love the principle more than you love your relationship with me.
Or love myself even, and my own feelings and emotions and my own responses, my own life and everything. I will love the principle more than I love my own life, because I understand that the principle is what brings my whole life meaning and happiness and purpose, and so I love it even more than I love my own life. Right?
And to get the principle in you, you won't have to wait for a situation with. You have to develop that love of the principle and receive it into you, and not just wait for the interaction, say with your partner or your friend or whatever, to trigger you into growth or change.
Mind you, that can help,
Of course, it will. Yeah.
but you're better off doing the principle before that
Well,
situation.
if you seek it before those interactions, then when you get to the interactions, you'll be like, here's I can experiment with the principle. You know, whereas most of it just like, everything's fine. Oh, now there's an interaction. Shit, what am I doing?
So everything is calm and relaxed and everything in the relationship, everything's fine. But as soon as there's a challenge in the relationship, so what do I do? What do I do? You know, it's like deer in the headlights, like, you know, like, and that's how we are. We because the principle is not there yet. See, when the principle is there, when you're presented with a situation, right, I know what to do. And in fact, what happens is you do it immediately without even thinking about it when the principle's in your heart. You don't even need to think about it.
This is
You
why
just automatically do it.
This is why Mary is awake from 2:30 a.m. and Jesus sleeps like a baby. Because Mary's like, I don't know. Jesus is like, this is how I interact. You know, that is, when you fight the principle, when you still learn the principle, when you all these things, you know, it creates all this turmoil that is gone when the principle is there. There might be more emotions when the principle is there, but the turmoil. This is what I observe.
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting when we were away because a lot of people come up in their addictions and want certain things, and the more in harmony with the principle you are, the less you meet everybody's addictions, of course. So, and it's not a decision, like it just happens. Like, you know, it's like, so people come up and I say, oh, I'm not interested in talking about that. It's like, you know, and it's like shock on their face and everything, and straight away they're triggered into certain things, and I'm, well, that's what I felt to say, and that's what I'm saying. You know, it's automatic, but it's not like I didn't have to think that that's what I would do. See, a lot of people believe that I plan out my conversations with I plan a conversation with anybody. Like, because when the principle's in your heart, it's like, here's a conversation. The principle's in your heart. You act out the principles in the conversation. That's how it is. You're not trying to plan and prepare yourself and write a whole heap of notes for yourself and all of this. Well, what do I do? You know, because the principle is present inside of you. So I would say to you, Sue's asking a question about your relationship. Get more of the principles in your heart and you'll know what to do. Does that make sense? Now, while I could say to you, do this, do that, do this, do that, at the end of the day, if I'm saying that to you without the principle in your heart, I'm actually working against your current will. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you'll notice a lot when we give examples, we talk in generalities. In some cases, we talk with you specifically. The times when we talk with you specifically about your personal issues is when you've asked us specifically about your personal issue, right? Because in that moment you've created an opening which allows us to not have to overcome your free will to give you an answer, right? Now, if you think about the principle being in your heart, your free will is always going to be in harmony with the principle. So when Elo comes and asks me a question, I can often just say, like it's often a 30-second conversation. You know, many of you think I have long conversations with everybody, but I actually don't. I have very short conversations.
The more humble you are, the shorter the conversation.
And you can just have what about this principle, that principle, this principle? And I goes away thinking about it, goes, yeah, I can see this and I see that. Does that make sense? Like, once a person is starting to connect to the principle, you can just say, here's a principle, here's a principle, here's a principle, what would you do? And the person can automatically go, yes, I didn't, you know, and they start having all these awarenesses that develop because they're in more harmony with the principle. So we could say, we could say a whole list of things to do within your relationship. Some regarding faith, some regarding truth, some regarding love, some regarding addiction, you know, some regarding responsibility, some regarding other principles. But if the principle's not in your heart, you'd be picking through it with your mind, going, really there? How does that apply here? I feel a bit confused there because it seems to be different there than when it's here. And you know, you start to get into that stage where your fear, you could say your panic, is dominating everything now. And so now you're very prone to influence and bad decisions, right? When the principle is in your heart, it's not like that at all. You're always prone to making the best decision in the moment when the principle's in your heart. So when you ask, what should I do in my relationship, the first real question should be, what should I do with myself to get myself in harmony with the principles, right? So that I can sort out my relationship. Can you see the difference, Sue?
Well, I understand the mess that I'm in. I mean, it's a bit like a bull in a china shop trying to make rules out of divine truth.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't work.
That's right, because the principles are not in the heart yet, right? So you know it's not working, so that's good. You know the relationship isn't working as well as you would hope, that's good. You know that it brings pain, that's good. So this is measuring the results of current actions. All of that is good. This is a part of the compensatory effect of the law, saying, not working, not working. Sue's not working, you know, like not working. And you go, okay, it's not working, right? Then you go, well, what do I need to do to make it work? To sort this out? What you need is God's principles to sort it out. So what I would recommend is this. What principles are involved in love? What does love actually look like compared to what you think it looks like? What does truth look like compared to what you think it looks like? Now, and when you start asking these questions, you get a lot of external help to help you educate. And help from people on earth, but also your spirit friends will help you too. Ask, what does a principle of love look like? What does the principle of truth look like? What's involved in the principle? How does it look? Remember, we started this in Ireland with the group about humility. We said, right, here's humility, here's a principle. It's a great principle for your life. You know, it's something that the human soul must learn to develop as a principle. What does it look like? And the average person doesn't really know, right? So the key is to firstly, remember we said to Claudia, key firstly, educate yourself about what it looks like. So what does love actually look like from God's perspective? What does truth actually look like from God's perspective? What does humility look like from God's perspective? What does faith look like from God's perspective? So these questions must be asked. And then compare that to what you think it looks like. Now, you can't do the first one by yourself because you already got taints about what you think they look like. That's going to come from outside of yourself. So reading the Paget messages can help with some of those things, right? Watching some of the stuff we've presented can help with some of those things, with what it looks like in terms of what do these qualities look like as they've been explained to you by someone that's not you. It has to be not you, because if it's you, it's going to be tainted by whatever you believe, right? It's going to have to come from outside of you somewhere. So it has to be not you, but it also has to be someone who does actually know about them, doesn't it? Not someone who just claims to know about them. There's plenty of people in the world, religious and otherwise, who claim to know what humility is. You know, some of them in the Catholic Church claim it's like whipping yourself, right? Some claim that that's humility. You know, some claim that faith is like you don't have to reason. There's no logic in faith. Some claim that there's like, you know, you just have to have faith that there's God the Father, God the Son, and the God the Holy Spirit. You know, it doesn't make any sense. So they're saying faith shouldn't make sense. Right? Is that true? Right? So, you know, you can write down faith should make sense. It should be logical. It should be, you know, you can write down the aspects that you can see already, and through this you'll get inspiration as well. And then you can say to yourself, what do I think of this? And compare the two. And then you'll start to recognise, this is where a lot of my sins are. Like, I think love is meeting a person's addiction. That's love. Now, if I think that, then, and you do think that, you think that at this stage. So when Raj comes along, you're going to try to meet his addiction, right? So in the relationship, you'll try to meet his addiction, but after a while it becomes exhausting, right? So there's the detrimental effect of doing it out of harmony with love. So let's be honest and say, well, love isn't meeting a person's addiction, because every time I meet the person's addiction, it feels worse. It gets worse. So obviously that's not good. So I'm going to have to stop doing that. So there's one aspect of love. So now Susan go, okay, if the one aspect of love is that I shouldn't ever meet my partner's addiction, let's start feeling about what his addictions are and my addictions to meet them. Right? Let's feel about just that. And then every time he wants an addiction met, or I want one met, so if I want one met, I don't meet it.
Don't seek him out.
Don't seek her out any. So if I want an addiction met from Mary, I don't seek her out anymore. And if Mary comes to me seeking addiction, I go, sorry, you're in an addiction. Can't do anything about it. All right? See what happens. And as you see what happens, your faith builds, your faith in the principles builds. By engaging that behaviour, everything changes. So it starts with your education, and then it continues into your sincere personal application of the education. So remember I said that to Claudia, there are the two things that we need to do to make progress, and in every situation you can do these two things. You get educated and then make some sincere application of that education. So to sort out the issues with a relationship, you need education about the principles, and then you need to put it into sincere application. And everything will get sorted out. Now it might mean that Raj sorts himself out and you closer, or it might mean that Raj doesn't sort himself out and you break up. And it doesn't matter how old are you now?
75.
75, doesn't matter. You're young.
I've got one foot in the grave, but that's okay.
You got one foot in the grave.
Oh, I don't even believe that.
Your soul has no grave. So,
Not even for your flesh, though. Yeah,
so pretty healthy. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, you got to do the dig, get a dig.
Yeah, dug the grave, yeah. And, yeah, so can you see though that I think partly what stops you, and this stops many people of your age, and most people above my age it stops as well, is that most people go, but I'm too old now to make these changes, and I'm too old to make an adjustment in my relationship,
And there's all the
logistics of it, and the difficulties of that, and there's all these other problems that would happen because of it. But you see, you're only 75.
And there's a lack of faith.
And there's thousands of years ahead of you. And the earliest time you can make decisions, the better off you'll be. Right? And if it happens when they're 75, well, at least it happened when you were 75 and not 175.
True.
Right? Yep. And this is a part of faith too, that you've got to make the decisions and you've got to act in harmony with the principles, no matter what your personal circumstances are. Right? And no matter how much you think you're not going to get looked after or cared for, and no matter how much you believe it's going to be too hard, because these are all just corrupt faith, like playing out. And it's very important to learn how to make these decisions as rapidly as you can. The faster you can make decisions in harmony with principles, the faster your life will change. Yeah. And you've been unhappy in your relationship ever since I've known you. And how long have we known each other now? It must be a solid 15 years, isn't it? Yeah. And the whole time. Go on.
But I think underneath it hides to unhappiness.
I know, that's a troubling thing, isn't it?
It is.
It is, isn't it? Like that you get so, like you stay in unhappiness for such a long time that the only way to continue living in it is to just numb out to it. Yeah, and you know, that's a really sad thing for your soul, because for your soul to enjoy life, it's going to have to not be numb. It's going to have to be sensitive. And numbing out is not a good course of action. And this is something that happens to many people, so it's not just yourself. And most people, usually by the time they're in their 60s or 70s, they've numbed out to a large portion of their life. And it's not good. It's not good for our soul, not good for our future. You see, a lot of people in the situation you're in don't change it while they're on earth. They arrive in the spirit world and there's forced changes, but they're still numb. And it takes time, sometimes many years, for them to unnumb themselves, like to get back their sensitivity that they have as a child. It takes many, many years for many people to get back that. So the earlier you can start that process, the better it's going to be. And it's better for everyone around you too, by the way, not just you.
I'm not sure that I've ever really known what it is to be happy.
I'd agree
From
with that.
childhood all the way through. Probably don't have very good expectations.
Yeah, I think most people would feel the same. You know, it's a rare thing to find a person who's like quite joyous and happy about everything in their life, right? Yeah. Very rare on earth. And, you know, there's lots of reasons why that's the case, but don't numb out to it. Go through it. Have some faith that if you go through it, you'll be happier and faster. You know, like what I see people doing is numbing out, thinking that it's going to be a solution to something. But it isn't. It just creates more problems. And it creates more problems not just when you're alive on earth, but as your life continues in the spirit world, there'll be more problems there too. So far better to address that as much as you're able to. You know?
Well, as you know, I have a problem. I have an anger problem.
Yep.
And probably because I haven't, all my life I have been numbing out and really not seeking to find the right solutions to things. So what's happening now is I just respond to a lot of things by being angry.
Yep.
And that's you just get to feel that this is just, you know, what on earth am I?
With that's the wrong direction, Suze. That's just judging yourself for an effect that is really almost the natural consequence of living in addiction and numbing out. You're going to end up in an angry place. Wouldn't it be better to say, what's the truth of how I've gotten here?
Yeah, and also I don't see anger as a huge issue. Remember years and years ago I gave a talk, anger is your...
Your friend or your friend?
No, I said not your friend.
Fear is your friend. Let's not make friends.
Many of you have made friends with me.
You crossed it over.
So anger is your...
Fear, they use fear to guide me. Tell me to do fear and anger, you'll be my friend.
That's how most of it is. It's like the opposite of what I said. It's sort of like, yeah, as Mary said, fear is my guide and anger is my friend. But actually, fear is your friend and anger is your guide. And if you look at anger being your guide, your anger is telling you things are wrong. Something's wrong, and you want control over it.
Yeah, I do.
Right? So something's wrong, and you want control over it, is what your anger is saying. So if you're more aware, if you want to become more aware, more principled, you would go, I see my problem, my anger, this is guiding me to my problem, but instead of me staying in anger, it would be better to be more principled and go, okay, what is it guiding me to? Like, instead of controlling with anger, what do I need to feel instead? Right? But to a large degree, a lot of people are in a state of anger because they don't want to take action.
Yeah.
Right? So they want a different solution than them having to take an action. So in other words, let's say I feel Mary doesn't love me. Right? So my feeling would then be, Mary should love me. She's the one who needs to do better, not me. Right? So what I do then is get angry every time I feel she doesn't love me. So my anger is trying to say, Mary loved me. Mary loved me. You understand? My anger is saying, don't feel how Mary doesn't love you. Just be angry with the fact she doesn't love you, and force her into loving you, is what my anger is doing, right?
Trying.
So my anger is trying to get control or command of the situation so that I don't have to feel unloved, right? So in that regards, my anger is helpful in the sense that it's guided me to the problem, but every time I act in my anger towards the other party, I'm actually now trying to gain control over the problem
And not feel this other thing.
and not feel what I need to feel. Right? Now, we've taught you this over and over again, right? Over the last 15 years. So, if I was principled, what would I do? I would go, yes, I'm angry. Wouldn't I?
Don't
Because I have to be
judge it.
truthful.
I wouldn't judge it because that's just trying to shut down the anger, which is a shutdown of something else. So,
Yeah.
yep.
I would also have to be truthful and say, I want control of something here. What do I want control of? Wouldn't I, if I was principled? I would have to do that for myself. And I'd have to not take it out on the other person, even though I feel like I really want to. I would have to not do that, wouldn't I? If I was principled, I wouldn't be able to let myself do that. I'd rather go out and kick a punching bag rather than do that, or rather go out and have a yell and scream outside rather than do that, or anything but do that, right? And now I'm left with my feelings that I'm trying to control, which is wonderful. Because now I know what those feelings are that I'm trying to control. Right? The feelings that are out of harmony with love that I'm trying to control. Right? If I do that, if I act in a more principled manner with my anger, then I'll work out a lot of things. Yeah?
And I would be less inclined to build myself up as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because the
That's
trouble with
just-
acting in anger is afterwards you feel guilty, and then you want to punish yourself for how badly you treated the other person, and then you go, well, I did the wrong thing too, they did the wrong thing, but now I've done the wrong thing, and you have all this, oh, well, maybe I should let them do the wrong thing now, because I did the wrong thing, you know.
Maybe I should meet an addiction now because that's the one. I feel so
It just
bad.
gets so bad after that, right? So you end up with this whole thing of where you're tolerating your own bad behaviour and you're tolerating their bad behaviour as well, and you know, and you're doing it because you're guilty of your bad behaviour, and you don't want to feel how guilty you are about your bad behaviour. So that you rather them be bad rather than you feel guilty about your bad behaviour, and it just goes on and on and on as to what we do when we're unprincipled. Right? None of which has to actually happen if we were principled. And the beauty of being principled in these circumstances is that you'll rapidly find out the emotions you have, you'll rapidly find out your problems, but also you'll start to make decisions and choices, and rather than just hoping for a better outcome by being angry about it. See, the average person uses anger to get a better outcome.
It's a corrupt faith, isn't it?
Yeah.
Where we think that anger is going to provide the solution.
Yeah, it's like the more Mary doesn't love me, the more angry I get with her, as if that's going to help.
But anger says, yes, anger's my friend. It's going to help.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So obviously that's not going to help. You know, the more angry I get with Mary, the less she's going to love me, right? Yeah. So that's not going to be the solution to her loving me, but because my anger is telling me it is the solution, because my anger says I don't want to feel how unloved I am. I just want her to love me. So get her to love me. Try harder to. So in other cases it might be, okay, if Mary will love me more if I do more for her. Right? So try harder with Mary. I try harder with Mary. Try harder with Mary, and she still doesn't love me. Sort of like, you know. But I try harder and try harder, and hopefully she'll love me if I try harder. You know, if I do more for her and make her feel more fulfilled in all different areas and give her more allowances, you know, in terms of day-to-day life, and just let her do what she wants, but also whatever she wants I do for her as well. You know, hopefully in the end of that she'll love me. No, she won't. She'll disrespect you.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that the result of that? And that's what's going to happen for sure. But the average person doesn't feel that way because they either don't want to be like in a rage. If they don't want to be in a rage, then they do this other thing, which is panda, and hope that works. And of course, none of those things work because both of them, or the rage and the pandering, are out of harmony with the principle.
Yeah.
And this is why the principles are so economical, is once the principle is in your heart, you'll know exactly what to do in every circumstance, in every moment, without even having to make a decision about it.
And we already do that, don't we, with fundamental things like don't steal, you know, issues that maybe we've learned about the environment and everything, like we do have some principles.
Some.
Yeah,
The average person has some.
yeah, and so that kind of
No,
proves.
you know not to murder, and you don't think about murdering someone every day, right?
You don't go, oh,
You
don't do
go,
that,
oh,
Suze."
God, don't
Yeah.
do that, don't do that. You know,
Yeah.
Raj is annoying me, don't murder him. Because that feeling is not in you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, and the
principle is
principle
there.
is in you, it's not right, and it's in your heart,
yeah,
which says, you know, for a murderer, it's not in his heart. You know, for a murderer, he feels opposite to that. He feels like, I've got the right to murder somebody. I can do it any time I want. That's how a murderer feels. The principle is not in his heart. The principle of, you know, not murdering is in your heart. So you don't have to worry about not murdering someone. It's never going to happen, right? But there are other principles that are not in your heart,
corrupt, yeah.
that are corrupted, but not in your heart. And of course, those principles that are not yet in your heart, there'll be an opposite principle generally that is in your heart, that you'll be acting upon, the corrupted principle, and then of course that's going to cause all sorts of trouble and problems. Yeah. So I think the important thing to say to you, Suze, is this. Focus more on getting the principle in your heart rather than sorting out your relationship. Because if you get the principle in your heart, you will know how to sort out your life. The whole life.
Not just
Not just a relationship. Your life with your children, with your parents, with your husband, with anybody in the future. Women, men, you'll know how to deal with all those things because the principles will be there, right? So that's the thing to focus your attention on more than anything else. Now, the average person then goes, but then I don't get my problem solved. I want my problem solved today. And I'm going, your problem ain't going to be solved unless the principle's in your heart. The most economical way to get any problem solved is to have the principle in your heart. Because no problem is able to be solved without the principle in your heart. You follow? So while it may look like it's going to take a long time, it doesn't have to. It may look like it is going to. And then we get into this impatient state where we go, oh, but I want the answer now. Like, I want the answer today. I want to sort this out today. Unless the principles are in your heart, you're not going to be able to sort it out today. Because you're going to be the person sorting it out.
Yeah.
And the principle needs to be in your heart in order for it to be sorted out. Like, no one else can nurse you through sorting it out. You're going to have to sort it out. And to sort it out, the principle has to be in your heart. Because you're not going to sort it out if it's not. So the most economical thing to do is to get the principles in your heart, and then you'll find it so easy to sort out everything. Right? And when I say easy, you won't care about your feelings about it. You won't care about Raj's feelings about it. You won't care about your mum and dad or your kids' feelings about it. You'll sort things out. It won't matter who's feeling what, even if you're feeling something. That doesn't matter either. They're just all ant emotions. Right? Because the principles are mountains and the emotions are ants. Yeah? The principle is the thing that matters. That's the thing that's going to bring happiness. It's going to bring fulfillment.
And it's the strong thing, actually. It's really
It's the power. It's where the power
It's
is.
where the power is, yeah.
God designed the whole universe around His principles.
Yeah.
Everything works when you're in harmony with the principle. That's where the power of your life is, in the principle. You know, everything's going to work out a lot better when you're in harmony with that principle. So yeah.
It's all the principles that I've broken in my life up to now that have landed me exactly where I am right now.
Correct. That's very correct, yeah.
Yeah.
And all the principles you break are all your sins
Yeah.
as well. It makes sense?
Yeah.
So if you deal with the principles, you deal with your sins. the sort of automatic consequence of having principle is that you deal with your sin.
Thank you.
Sandra.